Hello and welcome to another We Wonder. Today is a great topic and it's really about our carrier access. So we get this question quite a bit, how come you have so many different insurance carriers with We Insure? And it is a great topic and a great story. So I'd like to get to that today. First off, I'm Chris Pfluger. I'm the Chief Development Officer here at We Insure. And I have with me to start off Mr. Phil Vasali. He is our Chief Executive Officer and founder of We Insure. And it's a great story. So Phil, one of the top questions we get, right, is when we come aboard, what carriers do we have? How many do you have in this state? What's going on? And I think it's great to take a step back and think about it for a second. Why do we have so many carriers? Where did this come from? Right? I know your story, and I want you to share that with everyone if you could.
Morning, Chris. How are you?
Great.
Good. Yeah, we do have a lot of carriers. We got a lot of strong relationships out there. It's necessary because when we first started, just in the state of Florida, North Florida is different than South Florida. So the carrier's appetite is different throughout the state. And since we have offices all over the state, we need to have more markets to satisfy that. So we have so many opportunities. And so that's the reason why we had a contract with so many different carriers, because we want to go ahead and always be competitive. And just because one insurance company is good in Central Florida doesn't mean they're going to be competitive in Panhandle, right? So just new markets.
And that's exactly right. So in your story is interesting because you were with a captive for many, many years. You were very successful. But tell us about that. So obviously you were restricted. A captive means you're with one organization like a State Farm, Farmers, Allstate, and you're stuck with just what they're limited to offering. So tell us a little bit about kind of the struggles you had initially and why you decided to create We Insure.
Absolutely love the captive model. Again, this is 20 plus years ago when I first started, and brand name that obviously was very appealing. However, when you represent one company, you only have one rate. And so a great example is, Chris, if you were my client and Chris called me up and said, Phil, my auto, my home went up 10, 20, 30%. Unfortunately, I didn't have any other options. And to be successful in the insurance industry, it's all about the residual, the renewals. I want to keep you as a client, Chris, for many years. And plus I want to do the right thing by you. I want to make sure you're paying a competitive premium for the great coverage. And if I only had that one option, it's hard for me to say, well, please pay the 30% more just so I can still be your agent, when it's like a commodity in a sense for like auto insurance, that the coverages with the bodily injury is the same, with comparing apples to apples with the other insurance company with another national carrier. I couldn't just say for you to pay the same price. And what else has happened, Chris, when I was with a captive, I felt like I was the biggest referral source to the local independent agents because they had all the options. And so I knew the writing on the wall. I could definitely see it.
Well, it's interesting, Phil, before I got into this as deeply as we have, I used to think, well, I need to go with one of those big name, captive carriers because they're advertising everywhere. Right? They advertise all the time. And what I found out subsequently was their actual market share is dropping each year, but they're trying to keep ahead of that with all this advertising. But in the end, in some markets, they truly are not the best option by far. And that could be anything. That could be USAA to Allstate to Farmers, to whatever it might be. They do a lot of great advertising, funny ads, those type of things, just like Progressive does, which we do represent. As we look at some of those, what you really want to be able to do is have the right choice for your family in that particular market, not something that looks like a name brand and pay 30% more for the exact same or even lesser coverage. And so that's what I found to be the case. Was now that I know about it, that brokerage model is really the future of insurance.
Absolutely, and it's a step more than that, Chris. Is the model of We Insure is not just the market access. Look, every new person who joins We Insure, it's all about the market access from day one because they don't have any customers. after they have 100 customers, 500 customers, what do you think the real reason why they're at Reinsure? It's all the back end support that we offer. That's what is really separates us from anyone else. Is from day one, we're really we take ownership basically of that account and allow our agencies to go ahead and just keep doing what they do best and allow us to handle the servicing.
Well, two things I've heard, and I'll let you go. Two things I've heard from all of our existing owners after they came aboard was, I saved whatever amount of time. Some people said I saved 2 months a year. Some people say I saved 4 or 5 months in a year of not having to do the service and having it handled for me by a competent, licensed service team that could do a much better job than I could do. And secondarily, that service allows me to really focus on helping clients. So I can help more people and do more business and grow my book quicker than I could in any other format that existed out there. So really a huge benefit. Has nothing to do with carrier access, right? No. It's a funny part is they come in for the carrier access because everyone needs it. It's very hard to get these days and maintain. We have an entire team that does that, but it's all of the other services that they truly realize is the benefit to joining Reinsure.
1,000 million %. That's 100% accurate. So, but I totally agree everything you just said, and but again, I understand the market access is so appealing to an agent, and obviously we have it, and we have got the great relationships with the national carriers.
It's true. Well, Phil, I want to say thank you for joining us this morning. I'm going to switch over, change it up a little bit, and talk a little bit about how this actually works and who maintains that carrier relationships across the board. And with this national expansion that we have, I think we're in 17 states right now, and we're having conversations to look, I wouldn't be surprised if we're in 25 by the end of the year. But as we go forward, I don't want to be predictions, but I'm guessing. But I would say that that's very exciting. And I want to talk to the team who actually manages those relationships day to day.
Chris, have a good one. Bye-bye.
So up next, we have two gentlemen joining us. Mr. Pete Crow, the Chief Revenue Officer here at Reinsure, and Mr. Ron Caravello, the VP of Sales. And together, they work together on a lot of these things, but the carrier relationships and how important they are part of national expansion, but how important they are to the relationships to our owners and our producers on a day-to-day basis and making sure that access is there. I can tell you definitively for myself, I've had situations where my insurance went up 22%, and I was with one of those captives. I couldn't get that person to call me back because the only thing they would be able to tell me was, sorry, Chris, I can't help you. Everybody has an increase, and I'd have to do the shopping myself. So one of the main benefits is having a Reinsure agent is they can be your agent for life, and they certainly can help me do the shopping, find the best solution for my family, and I don't have to do all that work. Right, I don't have to carry all my deck pages around and hope that I'm picking the right coverage. What do I know, right? So I want to have a professional that I can lean into and say, "Tell me your thoughts." So let's start with Pete. Pete, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. How you doing today, Chris? I was actually thinking about that story when you were talking to Phil, because you've brought that up before, and I think it is really a testament to our model, and like you said, really that agent for life mentality, where we're bringing all the choice you can to that client.
Exactly. Sorry. I think we have a pause there. So yeah, I would say it really is that choice. And Mr. Ron Caravello. Ron, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thank you for having me on. And as you mentioned, Pete, I think we're like the dynamic duo of relationships over here, right? So, we heard Phil's story as a captive, right? And part of what we call the power of we is the power of choice, right? And our carrier partners and really what it turns into, Pete and I work closely with them to make sure that there's a term we like to use, mutually profitable relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really ultimately in the end what we strive towards. And I'll give credit to our founder and CEO Phil Vassalli for this one. The win-win-win, right? It's got to, whatever we work with somebody, it's got to be a win for our insureds, a win for us, and of course, a win for the vendor and the carrier, right? And so that we approach, Pete, right? We approach all of our relationships this way. And I think it works really well for us, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think that's where, Ron, I think we've been on a lot of those calls, talking to a lot of whether it's a current relationship or a new relationship. And I think every one of those carriers appreciates that. And to be honest, how we operate. We've got over, Chris, now 150 agencies, 17 states, and to your point, growing. And that way they don't have to go out and try to talk to all these different agency owners. And there's kind of twofold there. One is, we can, Ron, as you know, and we have those conversations. We're working to make sure we've got the best product, the highest commissions. We're bringing to our agency owners on a daily basis. And in certain markets, that's a big deal because that changes all the time in terms of the kind of products they're bringing. And again, those commission structures as well. But at the same time, we want those carriers to build relationships with our agency owners. Again, we're bringing a lot of that training, a lot of that experience to the table, but we want them to build those relationships, and we bridge that, Chris. And that's a lot of what we do too, is making sure we're getting those local introductions to those carriers and our agency owners. So again, they become the experts as well and build those relationships.
And that's a great point. As we talk about that, and again, we're going to talk in a minute here about kind of how this works on a national expansion basis. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about, kind of why the carriers like We Insure, right? We know why we like them, and why, all of our agency owners love them, right? Because they want to have as much choice as humanly possible, because they want to be able to help every family they talk to. But why would carriers like We Insure?
Well, there's one word, Ron, that comes to mind for me is really efficiency, and I think from a carrier standpoint, again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. It's just a second ago about, again, they're coming in and they're talking to us, Chris, at headquarters level. Again, we're working out, making sure we're talking not just about today, but a year from now, what kind of products, what kind of markets are you going into? What is their strategy? And then how are we bringing that back to our agency owners? And again, then we can go back to our network and communicate that out. And again, schedule those trainings and making sure those introductions are made. So a lot of efficiency there with carriers. Ron, wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes. To expound a little bit upon that, there was an example probably about 5 years ago, right after I had come onto the corporate side. We actually had one of the largest national partners that we work with actually come to us and say, we did an internal study and we took into account the cost of a rep visiting. And at that time, Pete, we had 60 locations. And they said, we actually did an internal study that when we have to go and manage 60 different locations that are independent, for example, it costs X number of dollars. But when we work with you, it only costs Y number of dollars, right? Mm-hmm. And it was significantly less. And Pete, you hit the nail on the head with the term efficiency. For the carrier, it's a super efficient way to work with. And we talked about how do we start this conversation, right? Mutually profitable relationships. And so, and Pete, we look at this all the time. Carriers are running on extremely thin margins, right? There's a perception out there that carriers are these big, rich, Goliath organizations that are just making tons of money. And ultimately, yes, is it a profitable? It has been a profitable business, but at the same time, it's built on volume, right? So the actual policy itself, every penny matters, so to speak, right? And so really the dollars that they save working with us, Chris and Pete, it really translates to a much more profitable relationship for the carrier.
And Chris, one more thing I'd add to that is we know our agency owners. And so whether they're coming on board or they've been with us for 10 years, we know them. We know the kind of business they're writing, the kind of business they want to write. We're just having a conversation this week with an agency owner about how they're looking to grow their business, kind of diversify the different types of products that they're writing out there. And so, again, that's great. Then we go back, we make sure they get those introductions, they get that training with those carriers and those products that are going to make them successful. So, again, yeah, you're right, Ron. I mean, we serve as that kind of go-between, but it really is helpful for those carriers in terms of driving those efficiencies and us bringing that experience to the table.
Well, how about, having obviously we talked about efficiency, having a very large distribution channel that we have across now 17 states, giving us a much larger footprint to write more insurance. So that's great, I'm sure. But when you think about it, it's not just we're writing homeowners and auto, right? You could be commercial of all sorts. You could be talking about, when you say homeowners, it could be $300,000 homes, or it could be $14 million homes. And those are different carriers generally, right? So it's not the same people. So, they have the opportunity to plug into a system like ours that has access to all those different types. So one carrier may be really heavily utilized, like Chubb or other, high-end carriers, for high net worth clients in Palm Beach, Florida, for example. And then you may have Progressive across all the footprint, right? For auto, and in some cases auto and home, right? So it just depends on, what works best in that particular market and what's more heavily utilized. This gets to my next point. So the area, when we start accessing new markets and people ask, well, which carriers do I have? So we start talking about access to those markets. Well, what do you have? Like, I know in Florida you have 150. What do you have here? And we used to joke about this. If you're in Nebraska, 30 might be the same as 150 because the market, just isn't as, there's no hurricanes hitting every day. There's no seagulls popping up every day. And the market's a little more stable. Whereas in California or, even in Delaware, right, you may have to have more carriers because, the market with water or fire or whatever it might be. And Texas is the same, right? You could have, the top half of the state has X number of carriers and the bottom half has different carriers because Houston is close to the water. So they, you might have a hurricane coming. So it really does vary by market. With that in mind, we usually start off with kind of a base of those national carriers so everybody has like a good solid starting block. Mm-hmm. And then what do we do? That's always the question. How do we get them up to where it's really kind of customized for their state and their particular agency?
That's part of our onboarding process. Chris, as we get to know those prospects that are coming in and if they kind of award that franchise and they come into the We Network, that's really the name of the game. As you said, literally half, maybe 3/4 are going to be, honestly, Ron, kind of just that water situation where they're going to get those appointments. We have relationships with all those national carriers, to your point, whether it's Safeco, Progressive, Nationwide. You name those national carriers, we've got great relationships with them. Travelers, and Ron, I'm sure you can name off, rattle off 10 more. But that's just the start. At that point, then it really is, as I said before, getting to know that agency owner, making sure we understand the kind of business they're going to write. And then we fold in the other carriers, whether it's auto, it's home, it's commercial, as you were saying, we fold in those other carriers. And maybe there is a regional carrier that we need to go get, that we need to make sure that we have access to and we build that relationship with. But again, as you had Phil on a second ago, he was doing this for 10 years. He built all these relationships. And so again, we've been in that process, that mindset of always going out there, creating the relationships that we need to make sure we're successful in a marketplace. But you're right, it's a great mix always of national and then some of those regional carriers as well.
And that's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. I think every time I talk to Pete, I say he hit the nail on the head, and it's so true, right? Because what he said is absolutely correct, right? We've got that beautiful base, right? That base of national partnerships, right? But as we expand, as we grow, we know there's regionals and super regional carriers out there, many that we already work with, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really getting to know, and this is where a lot of our time gets spent, right? We just had a call at the end of the week last week with a very large super regional carrier. And you got regionals, you got super regionals. So super regional is going to be, probably in about 25 states, right? That's probably, anywhere from 15 to 25 states. I consider that a super regional. And this super regional basically said, yeah, where are you growing? And we gave a list of states that we've grown into last year, and some states that we're targeting. And they said, listen, 90% of those states are where we want to grow, right? And it was funny because, of course, we're excited to work with new carriers, but the excitement that we heard from their vice president, their director, was that of, wow, we're going to take this relationship to the next level. And again, what do we say? Win, 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 right? There's a win right there. And that carrier now is going to go back to their leadership, and we can really work with them now to grow that state, because they even said, right, Pete, we don't have tons of representation in some of these states, but be able to work with a partner like you that already understands our model, number one. And of course, they understand our model, We Insure's model, but now it's that true partnership that we've fostered over the last few years that's now going to help us grow with them through all the states that they want to grow in. And that's where we really give that value proposition. You've got the internal processes that we've built out, the communications that we built out. We have an amazing intranet where we can communicate these carrier updates and the new products and facilitate the trainings, right? All of that just leads to growth, right? And so as our carriers are listening to this, and as they're saying, what can we offer me? It's growth and a profitable relationship.
Hey, Chris, you said this a second ago, in terms of distribution channel. And I think what Ron's saying is really important about a carrier. They want to partner with us because they know we're growing, right? And so from that side, you do have these carriers. And again, these guys picked up the phone, reached out to us and said, hey, listen, we know you're growing. We see it. We know exactly what you guys are doing and how fast you guys are growing because the model works. And so from that side, wanting to partner with us as they look to grow, into the future and the future years. So that's a big deal. Again, you're going to have more and more carriers that we either strengthen our relationship with, again, more product through our current carriers or new carriers, that are coming to the table because, again, they see our growth and want to partner with us because for them, at the end of the day, we are that distribution channel. They know our agency owners have that experience and are bringing it to the table to be able to help the clients write their product.
And that couldn't be more, true as we go forward. The access in those new markets and the carrier relationships. So we have a team, right? So that's one thing I want to make sure that we did touch on again was we have a team of folks. It's not just Ron and you're making some calls. There's actually several people on the team that manage those carrier relationships. So we know if a carrier is saying, hey, listen, I'm in XYZ counties in Florida or I'm moving into, Kansas, we have those relationships to tell our own owners saying, hey, we're about to get a new carrier relationship, or they might be retracting in certain markets saying you're not going to have this carrier anymore. Or more importantly, they're about to have an increase of 25%. And so we have the opportunity to communicate that information in advance. You're not just an individual producer hoping to get all this stuff done. It's a definite highway of information is coming on all of our carriers, including training, updates, increases, removals from markets, whatever it might be, to make you that much more of a professional from an agency owner perspective. So to me, I think that's one of the big benefits is information, and someone else is an expert on a topic is handling it day to day.
Yeah, and that is a big piece of that. Yeah, you're right. We should not brush over that. I think I made the comment earlier, hey, it's just that water. It ain't that easy. So from that side, we say that because, again, that's the experience our agency owners, we want them to have, right? We don't want them worrying about it. But it is not easy to go get these appointments, let alone, manage it, month to month and year to year. And so that's where, to your point, we've got, around our carrier relations team, but then we call our agency services team. And they're the ones you come on board, they grab your license, they're working on your appointments day one. And so from that side, we grab that license, your license number, they're going to work, making sure you get your appointments, you get your logins. That's all stuff. If you were out there in the universe, by yourself, you'd have to do, filling out the paperwork, calling the carrier, seeing what commission structure you're getting, if you can even get access to that carrier and that product. And so, again, that's where, I think the huge value we do bring to the table is that day one access and again, managing those relationships. So again, you can get out there and just write business. You really help your clients.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, speaking as someone that owned an independent agency prior to joining We Insure, and I was the one that had to do that, right? I was the one that did the filling out all the paperwork, then meeting with all the carriers, and really gets to a point when you're on your own that all your time is spent doing something like that. And ultimately, as a salesperson, we say, when can I actually generate revenue? And that's the beautiful thing in this business, right? You're not making any money unless you are writing policies, right? Or your agency's writing policies. That's how we're going to generate revenue. And that's why ultimately, was it now 8 years ago, that's why I purchased a franchise from We Insure. And I can emphatically say, if I was in the same position again, now in 2021, looking at new agencies or what organizations to join, that's why I would do it all over again and buy a franchise from We Insure because of again, the term we use, efficiencies, right? But really, ultimately, in the end, what does that mean? Saving time and generating more revenue.
And so with that sentiment in mind, I get this a lot. Some people say, well, listen, I'm out here and I'm working as a producer for, a small agency that has, we have all the carriers, which means I probably have 7, right? 6, 7, 8, whatever it might be, maybe 3. Or, hey, I'm working at a captive and we're doing okay. We're doing okay on this. I don't think that they see the other side of this. I don't think they fully pulled back the curtain and said, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this. And that's what we hear a lot of times from owners that purchase, go through training, come aboard. I get that feedback a lot. Holy cow, I didn't realize your technology was this far ahead and this much more efficient than what I was already doing. Because I've heard of it, but I really didn't understand. Or, hey, I didn't realize there was this many services or this much marketing. Or when you say we do service is, an easy, big term, right? It's an easy term to kind of brush over and go, oh, service is great. but the amount of service that's associated with how many hundreds of thousands of phone calls that are taken on your behalf and how much work is actually done. When you say it saves me a couple months or up to 5 months a year, it's not a joke. I mean, that's work you're not doing that you're now focused just on growing your book. And so I didn't want to lose that point. But what I want to ask you, gentlemen, before we wrap this up, the one question I ask is, what if? So what if you're out there today and you're listening to this and you're another agency owner, you're an owner looking to get an ancillary business like in real estate or mortgage or whatever it might be and saying, hey, I've got leads. What if I were to try to do this myself? What would I run into, Rob? Like on a day-to-day basis, what am I going to run into? I said, I'm just going to set up my own agency and see what happens.
Yes, that's a great question, because I will tell you, I have spoken to people in the past that have done that, right? Tried that. And the truth is, and it's not just in any one particular state. This is becoming a nationwide issue, right? There's a number of reasons why. We're not going to get into all that because we'd be here for hours if we talked about why there's profitability issues within the industry. But you'll be lucky to probably get a small handful, and we're talking 3 to 5 carriers to a point, right? And I'll tell you this right now. My old agency was well established. It had been around since the 70s. Okay, so again, a very well established agency that I was able to buy into, and even then we had 10 markets, right? And we thought we were doing so good. And when I bought my We Insure franchise back in 2013, I literally had 5 times more markets, and we've greatly expanded our carrier offerings in the last 8 years. But it was great because I came, and I'll tell you a quick story. I was speaking with one of our new agency owners, one of our new owners in another state here in the Northeast, right? And this owner tells me, Ron, I built a very successful book of business being a captive. And I said, well, what was your quote to bind ratio, right? And he said, I was really good. I bound about 30% that came into my office. And ultimately, it's because I got to really know what that niche was of that carrier, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what? And again, he joined us. So I said, well, what prompted you to join We? And he says, I knew that even if I only had 5 carriers, that's 5 times more choices I have to offer my customers, and I can more than double my quote to bind ratio. So if I'm already quoting 100 policies a month and I only bound 30% of them, doing the exact same amount of effort, I can bind and generate much more revenue. So that's that win. The wins we talked about earlier. Again, we said we can win, but those are the wins that allows someone to say, hey, what's my quote to bind ratio going to be? And that's really the numbers that we talked about, right, Pete?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it is about, I think some people are just thinking about this month or this year.
Right.
And, I do think about Phil a lot, where he was thinking about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and just saying, is this sustainable? Can I do this for my business? And he was an agency owner. I mean, this guy wasn't just he had a very successful captive agency. And he just said, I just don't think this is going to work longer term because I don't have the choice. And I think that's where his whole premise was, I want to be able to help my clients. Phil loves his insurers, loves his clients, loves his customers, and he wanted to be able to help them. And so from that side, Chris, that's what I think about. I mean, all the stuff we talked about, the paperwork and the conversations and the meetings, but at the end of the day, you're in business to help people. And I think this is really that choice. And to your point before, people don't know, this is, a 10-year new model within insurance. People are just kind of waking up to the fact that this exists, that We Insure exists. And I think that's really the premise here is it's here, and it works, in terms of bringing that carrier access day one, the commissions, and obviously the service as well, and taking care of all of it. So, Ron, I think you said it well. So you can get out there and really build your business quickly and generate that revenue, because that's at the end of the day, you're trying to build that successful agency. And those first few years are just so critical to making sure you get off to the right start.
Well, it's again, gentlemen, I want to make sure, that's why I asked that what if question. If you might get a small handful of carriers, and then you're going to start at the bottom tier commissions and have to work your way up over years to get to where you could start on day one with We Insure. And that's the kind of stuff I like to say, we're jumping to the front of the line because we're giving you the fast pass, right? The Disney fast pass. We just give it to you. You're at the front of the line now. And let me tell you how this works. And you leverage our experience, our size, our marketing, our branding, all that stuff comes into play on day one for you. And it is a very different experience going through that, knowing that someone has your back and there's 100 people sitting there to support you in any question you have than starting on your own. I mean, that's night and day different.
Chris, I'll give you a real life example, right? I there was a national carrier that my old agency, we got an appointment with shortly before I left, right? We started off at 12% new commission, 10% renewal, and we had multiple tiers to hit before we hit max commission. I bought my We Insure franchise, and from day one, the first policy I wrote with that carrier was at 15 new, 15 renewal. And that in itself, again, there was a whole slew of reasons why I bought a We franchise, but that itself was an amazing reason and solidified again the reason why I made the choice that I made.
That puts a smile on my face right there, Ron.
Ron, I was going to ask you that. I was exactly going to ask you that. Like, hey, there had to have been an exact situation where you just went, wow, this makes sense. This makes sense.
Well, this is great. Well, guys, I think this has been fantastic, and I think it's been very helpful for folks, watching today and watching the future to understand exactly how we go into those states, how we have those national carriers as a base, how we grow out with some regional carriers, but really how those relationships that we built over the years and maintained for you can be leveraged to help you grow a much, much larger book of business down the road. So I sincerely appreciate you joining me today, and have a good one.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.